This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/future.
A warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bussin' Brackets. We're going to be taking a look at some of the mid-tier teams in college basketball, a few of the top teams that have been very much getting tested. We've got 2 big games that are going to be coming up for Monday, Duke versus Louisville, along with Arizona versus BYU. I'm going to get his thoughts on just how the travel, how the weather in general are affecting some of these teams that are having to play on the road, how big of a disadvantage is it for them with the travel, but how much might they benefit from these home crowds being a little bit less ruckus as well. So we're going to be talking about that. We'll take a little bit of a look at the ACC landscape as well, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, RCM, the mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Only Twitter/X questions that I've been getting is, am I still able to get to Texas Roadhouse with the snowstorm? And fortunately, the answer is yes, so that is good news. But that said, let's take a look at what was a very, very small college basketball slate on Sunday. Tried to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
What games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about? Here is the rowdy recap.
We had 4 games, so yeah, there was not a lot to be had here. And Florida Atlantic has been one of your better cover teams in all of college basketball, unable to get the job done against South Florida. They were up 36-33 at the half. South Florida pulls away late, 89-75, the final, despite the fact that South Florida only goes 7-27 from 3-point range. For Florida Atlantic, 7-22 from 3, but they just got blowtorched on the glass. For Florida Atlantic, they lose a rebound battle 49-35 as South Florida 21 offensive rebounds in this game. The main man was Isaiah Nelson. He supplied 12 rebounds, 15 points, and then Wes Enos was your top scorer. He supplies the team with 19 points. Damian Collins has been a little bit of a disappointment. He supplies 12 points off the bench as well. And for Florida Atlantic, Donovan Vanderpool, he came to play, 22 points, 5 rebounds, but he did have an off day from Cannon Carlisle, who can very easily shoot you into a game or out of a game. He had 16 points, but he had 17 field goal attempts, and he made 4 of them, so that was not necessarily tremendous. What else was not tremendous is if you're a Wisconsin Badgers fan, and if you're a Wisconsin sports fan in general, other than that Wisconsin triumph against Michigan, man, it's been a rough year. I am a man from the great state of Wisconsin, so I feel you on this one. For Wisconsin, they fall to USC 73-71. Game had 80 points in the first half, and then it became a slog in the second half. Was Wisconsin 9 of 37 from 3. On their 2-point shots, they went 14 out of 30, which isn't a whole heck of a lot better, but it was better. And for Wisconsin, Nick Boyd tried to keep the team lively. He had 29 points, 6 rebounds, but a Wisconsin team that has actually not generated a ton of second and third chances. They had 18 offensive rebounds in this game. They just couldn't cash in on them. And for USC, just 5 turnovers in this game. Chad Baker-Mazara went into takeover mode, 29 points, 4 boards. Ezra Usar, he was able to supply the team with 17 points, and for USC, it's 17 out of 23 at the free throw line. They do just enough to be able to persevere, get the job done, and while Wisconsin has been a little bit disappointing, well, for Oregon, it's been very, very disappointing. How about now 8-12 this year? They lose to Washington 72-57, and I recognize that Oregon was without their top 2 scorers in Nate Biddle, Long Jackson Shellstead, but man, not great to say the least. You had John Stewart step up with about 15 points. KJ Evans, he gave you 11 points, 8 rebounds. But for Oregon, they lose battle on the glass 45-23. They win the turnover battle 11-10, but they go 3 of 15 from 3. And Washington, who's been awful from three-point range, they are outside the top 3 with this regard. They go 10 of 21 from 3. Jacob Agansevich, who's from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, 12 points off the bench. Zoom Diallo and Kamari Peterson, great name. They had 12 points off the bench as well as each of your top 3 scores for Washington all came off the bench. So that was some good, clean fun. And then your other game was Mercyhurst versus Chicago State. And Mercyhurst has been a pretty solid team to the under. This one was a under, and it goes way of the underdog with regards against the spread. Mercyhurst stays off the outright upset, 61-59. The final, Chicago State goes 9-23 from 3 and plays even up on the glass, 32-32 for Mercyhurst. They've been very good in terms of generating turnovers, but lost the turnover battle in this one, 12-6. But way that they were able to weasel their way out, they go 10-25 from 3-point range with Bernie Blunt. Well, he bluntly gave you 19 points, so Chicago State was able to get a cover there. And if you're looking at college basketball right now, we have been noticing that the underdogs have been doing quite well this far this season. If you look over the last 7 days, it has been very much a turnaround for favorites, 176 and 163 against the spread for them, so hitting at about 52%. Meanwhile, it has been a very underwhelming last 7 days in college basketball. How about 199 unders to 140 overs? 58.7% hit rate to the under. Overall for the season, unders are hitting at about 50.6%, 1,744 unders, 1,703 overs, while underdogs overall for the season hitting at 51% against the spread, 1,759 and 1,687. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Tristan Freeman of Boston Brackets right here on Trust Go See with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
This podcast is supported by Trust & Will, an online estate planning service. Visit trustandwill.com for details.
If you're like me, you know you should probably create a will, but it feels intimidating and expensive. That's how I felt until I discovered Trust & Will. Trust & Will makes estate planning doable and less scary. With Trust & Will, you can create a trust or a will online in just a few simple steps for as little as $199. With Trust & Will, estate planning doesn't have to be intimidating or expensive. It can be straightforward, affordable, and take as little as 30 minutes. For my family, Trust & Will is all about protecting our future while we chase those big dreams today.
Trust & Will.
Get 20% off when you visit trustandwill.com/support at checkout. That's trustandwill.com/support to get 20% off. trustandwill.com/SUPPORT.
Inside Edge this college basketball season, well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here, Lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got our good friend Tristan Freeman aboard. He does such a great job over at Bussin' Brackets, looking at this great game that we all know and love. I know that he is hard at work taking a look at everything in college basketball. He's out there in the great city of Pittsburgh, so he's doing a great job in the Atlantic 10, the ACC, and the Rising League landscape. On top of that, he's doing some great work as well over at the Field of 68, Sleepers Media, and really covers all 365 Division I teams. You're able to find him on the old Twitter/X at HoopsNut351 all together. And Tristan, first things first, a happy late birthday to you, as I know that over the weekend it was your birthday, and always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Always great, and thanks for the wishes.
Absolutely. Hopefully, next birthday we get you a little bit of better weather here across the country because, man, everyone's getting pelted by snow unless if you're really, really down south. But that said, I want to start there because, there are a lot of teams that are going to be dealing with travel issues. We've seen a lot of games get postponed. How do you think that this affects teams? And do you think that it's an even bigger disadvantage for these road teams? Or do you think in a strange way it might help them because the home crowds that they're going to be going up against are going to be, for lack of a better term, less ruckus?
Yeah, I think the big game to watch with that will be Duke hosting Louisville on Monday night, because BYU and Arizona won't be affected as much. But yeah, if Duke's crowd, and obviously Cameron Indoor Stadium doesn't have, a ton of fans naturally, but the ones that do get there are always loud. So as long as, they get enough, then I don't think it should be an issue overall. And then, assuming that the worst of it ends, Sunday night, Monday morning, then I do think it should be cleared off enough that it won't impact the Tuesday games. But obviously, the Duke Louisville big matchup is one to watch, and that has huge implications when it comes to the ACC title race.
Absolutely. And how much do you think we might see some residuals throughout the week as well? Because we are going to be seeing some of these teams playing some funky schedules to where it's going to be a little bit more compacted this week. I think by next week, everything is going to be back to normal. But these next few days, I do think that it's going to leave some of these teams traveling at perhaps a little bit of a disadvantage.
Yeah, the ones who probably aren't going to be able to travel Monday night, so some may have to leave the day of, and that could be an issue for the road teams on the Tuesday matchups. And then obviously, some of the ones for Monday. And then who knows how many games will get, postponed. I think that the MEAC and SWAC have been proactive in postponing games already. But, Monday is sort of the big day for a lot of their matchups. So if those games get, postponed, I think in the future teams might have to play 3 times a week. And then depending on how those align, some teams could have a massive disadvantage.
Yep, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what happens these next few days with those teams. As joining me on the show, we do have Tristan Freeman. He does such great work over at Bussin' Brackets, and he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly we saw a wild weekend in college basketball, and you alluded to Arizona versus BYU. That's going to be a massive game on Saturday, because that's going to be a massive game on Monday, because we did see on Saturday Arizona mop the floor with West Virginia. They set up a big-time match up against BYU, took care of business in the Holy War. And outside of that, we did see a lot of the top teams in college basketball look a little bit wobbly. We did see Purdue lose. We did see Houston look very, very unimpressive on defense, which is very uncharacteristic for Houston. And just how do you take a look at the landscape of the sport? Because I felt like there was, going into the new year, a top 3 with Iowa State, Arizona, and Michigan, but really the lone team that has been able to stave off elimination, has been able to stay undefeated here in the new year, has been Arizona.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams who still have one loss as well, including Gonzaga and Duke and
UConn, who got a scare, yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, I do think these teams aren't as dominant as some of the ones, including last year. So it's kind of impressive in itself that these teams haven't taken losses. But yeah, I think a lot of these teams are going to be vulnerable, especially as they get more into specific road games. But yeah, right now, Arizona gets to claim that they're the best team, but that easily can change on Monday night when they play BYU. And if Arizona can get that win, then I think people need to take them more seriously as a title contender, because, they're a team that doesn't shoot the ball as much, and they obviously have a lot of freshmen who get plenty of minutes. That might deter people from having them as the best team. But as you mentioned, the Michigans and Purdue's of the world haven't been overly impressive as well. And if Arizona isn't the team to beat, then who is it? Maybe it's just a large group of teams who can be title contenders, but could also be vulnerable, which can set up for a very entertaining March.
Yep, it certainly could, and I'm going to be very, very fascinated to see what happens in that game, because with BYU, they're a team that I think is really lurking out there as well, a team that a lot of people have just outside the top 5, but they have the chance to make a massive statement on Monday. As we know, they've got one of the top players in all of college basketball. And how do you take a look at this game for BYU, a BYU team that did suffer that loss a few weeks ago against Texas Tech, where things unraveled on them in the last 10 or so minutes, but really outside of that, I would say that this has been a pretty impressive BYU team, one that has been able to certainly do it on offense, but I think under the radar has been how good this team has been defensively too.
Yeah, I mean, they're the only team in the country with 3 guys averaging 10 a game. And those guys, AJ DeVanster, Ricky Saunders, Robert Wright, provide, just about all of their offense. But yeah, if they get good, defense, particularly in the post with Kibakeda and other guys who sort of, fill out the rotation together, then they're going to be good enough. And because, offensively, they're going to be as potent as the best of them. They can shoot the ball really well at times. But I think defensively, we've seen times where they've been iffy, including, a game against TCU. But we also, when it comes down to key moments, they can get the stops needed. And they've also, outside of the Texas Tech game, which they got fairly handled, they played basically the bottom half of the Big 12. So, starting with Arizona, you have Kansas and Houston coming up as well. They're going to get tested. I think, we'll find out very quickly in the next couple of weeks whether or not this BYU team is a legit Final Four contender or if they're a team that can be, again, very vulnerable because they're going to face now the top half of the league.
Yep, it is going to be a lot of fun to take a look at that game. And you were also alluding to the other big game that we're going to be seeing on Monday. That'd be Duke versus Louisville. Obviously, Duke is going to be the favorite here. We'll see if they get 100% crowd or a little bit less than that. But how do you take a look at these two teams? Because for Duke, for the most part, they've been able to get the job done here in ACC play. But we know that they've gotten a few tests, especially against Georgia Tech. And for Louisville, they finally were able to get back online over the weekend. I think that we saw just how big Mikal Brown is for that offense, and he was not out there the first time these teams played, where Louisville had a lead at the half. They blew it in the second half, and I'm very fascinated to see this rematch because I do think that Brown could be the big-time X factor that keeps Louisville lively.
Yeah, had 20 points in his return game and an easy win over Virginia Tech, and yeah, he's one of the best freshmen in the country. Went on, and he's going to give them something. He's going to give Duke something to deal with. One of the weaknesses for Duke has been perimeter defense at times, and when you have not only Brown, but also Ryan Carnwell and Isaac Neely as lethal sharpshooters on the side, that's going to be very tough to deal with. And I can see Duke having fits against them, even on the road. And, Louisville with the injury sort of falling back a bit. But if they can get a win like this on Monday night, then all of a sudden people can start talking about them being Final Four contenders again.
Yep, absolutely. And just really the hierarchy of the ACC, I feel like has been very interesting to say the least. And I'm sure that you would agree with that because certainly Duke has been right there towards the top. But teams not named Duke, it feels like they're all beating up on themselves. With Louisville entering into the day at 4-3, Clemson's been able to really stave off elimination, and they've been able to do a good job of taking care of business. But we saw Virginia take a loss over the weekend at home to North Carolina. North Carolina has been 4-3. We've seen ups and downs with the West Coast teams in Cal and Stanford. Just what do you make out of the ACC? Because it just feels like the middle of the conference right now is really beating up on one another.
And the bottom is giving teams fits as well. I mean, Florida State upset Miami last week and nearly upset SMU as well. They're proven to be, a team that's finally being competitive in league play. And ultimately, teams like Virginia, Miami, NC State, they're good, but they're not so much better from the bottom half to where they're going to get easy wins, including on the road, because NC State had to fight against last place Pitt to get the win last weekend. So, they're still on pace to get, more bids than they've gotten in several years, which is a good thing, but it's going to be difficult, especially on the road. And I'm interested to see what teams like Virginia Tech does and Syracuse and Stanford, because they could be teetering on whether or not they're going to, still be in the bubble conversation or if they're going to take a step back and fall out of it, because those teams are definitely in danger after past performances.
Oh, no doubt they are, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get the next few weeks in the ACC as Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin' Brackets, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Tristan, there's been a lot of intrigue here the last few weeks in college basketball. I just want to give you the floor here as to a few teams that are really standing out to you, and you just want to see what they do the next few weeks. Perhaps they say surprise team to the positive, maybe it's a few surprise teams to the negative, just a few teams that have your attention, and you want to find out a little bit more about them to see what we have gotten the last few weeks, if it's real or not.
Well, I think two teams to put in that is out west in Gonzaga and St. Mary's. Obviously, Gonzaga is without both Brayton Huff and Graham Ike, and surviving San Francisco at home. Meanwhile, St. Mary's, they have a gaudy record, but they've been struggling in WCC play a bit, going down to the wire with Portland of all teams at home as well. They both have a bye during the week, but play each other on Saturday. And besides the usual, WCC implications, St. Mary's needs a win for their resume, and Gonzaga needs a win to sort of stay in the 1 to 2 seed conversation. And considering that Gonzaga will be without Brayden Huff, it'll be interesting to see if they can get this win against St. Mary's front court, and whether or not St. Mary's is a team that's still serious, because again, they haven't looked very good in the past couple of weeks. They have the Santa Clara loss, but they're still in the mix for a tournament bid.
Yep, they certainly are. And Santa Clara is another team I think is going to be very interesting. If Graham Ike is not back by Valentine's Day, they're going to be playing that game on the 14th on the road against Santa Clara. That's a team to watch out for. And would you say that the team that perhaps has the most question marks in the country might actually be Gonzaga? Because if they have Brayden Huff and if they have Graham Ike for the NCAA tournament, that's a team that I think could certainly make a run, with their lone loss being against Michigan. But I'm right there with you with the San Francisco result being a little bit off-putting. It just feels like they've got a lot riding on the next few weeks, and it's not even necessarily what happens on the court, but rather the health of those two guys.
Yeah, and I think that there's more optimism that Ike will return soon compared to Huff, who's going to be out for at least another month or so. But the guard play has been the biggest concern for the Bulldogs. I mean, Mario St. Superi has been up and down, so is Brayton Smith. Neither of them was on the floor for the last couple of minutes in the game against San Francisco. It was more Adam Miller, who, again, himself went scoreless in that game, going there. I mean, we've seen freshman Davis Vogel. He had 15 against the Dons. He's emerged in the rotation as well. Jalen Worley has been, the do-it-all playmaker for them as well. So it's a new-look Gonzaga team as of late, and they're still winning. But is this group going to be good enough to make a run in March, which ultimately matters? And again, we'll have a big indication of that against a team with a good front court in the Gales.
Oh, no doubt about it. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get in the WCC the next few weeks. I'm going to be very interested in Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and I still think Santa Clara is going to be a very pesky team moving forward. And I know you, Tristan, are doing a great job gauging a little bit of everything in this great sport. You're dialed in on what we're seeing out there in the city of Pittsburgh, on the national landscape, at so many different outlets. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow me at HoopsNut351 on Twitter/X. You can also follow my work at HoopsHQ, Field 68 in Bustin' Brackets. And we're just getting ready for February play, which is going to be incredibly important when it comes to bracketology.
Absolutely. And Tristan, he does such an excellent job taking a look at this great game of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, learns such great insight. So a big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some big shots.
This podcast is supported by Trust & Will, an online estate planning service. Visit trustandwill.com for details.
If you're like me, you should probably create a will, but it feels intimidating and expensive. That's how I felt until I discovered Trust & Will. Trust & Will makes estate planning doable and less scary. With Trust & Will, you can create a trust or a will online in just a few simple steps for as little as $199. With Trust & Will, estate planning doesn't have to be intimidating or expensive. It can be straightforward, affordable, and take as little as 30 minutes. For my family, Trust & Will is all about protecting our future while we chase those big dreams today.
Trust and Will.
Get 20% off when you visit trustandwill.com/support at checkout. That's trustandwill.com/support to get 20% off. trustandwill.com/SUPPORT.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin' Brackets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots. Sports.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @Junit_81. We're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order, which is, due to the weather, just a complete and utter mess because games are being added to the board. They go to the bottom. We will have the ACC games, the Big Ten, and the game out there in the WAC up top. Everything else is the extra games. That would be the NEC, the SWAC, the MEAC. If you get confused by the order, wherever you're listening, Twitter/X, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, I list the order of the games in there. That makes things much easier because on a day like this, it's just really, really difficult. But that said, we've got ourselves games. Let's find ourselves some winners. 887, 888. Louisville's on the road against Duke. Duke is a 7.5 to an 8-point favorite. 157 to 157.5 is the total. A very astute point by our good friend Tristan Freeman that Duke might not have the full home crowd that they typically do, but I'm still willing to trust them here. I did set them as an 8.5-point favorite. This is a Duke team that has actually been generating quite a few turnovers on defense. You typically don't find that with them. They've been a little bit hot and cold with their defense here in ACC play, but they still clock in number 9 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Louisville, everyone talks about the great offense and everything like that. This is a team that does rank 19th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a rock solid team on the glass as well. This Louisville team, 18th in the country with regards to their overall rebound percentage. And getting back Mikael Brown is just absolutely massive. Now, Brown has only been shooting around like 30 or so % from 3-point range, but he just gets everyone else involved because he's their main facilitator, give you about 5 assists, 17 points per contest. Ryan Conwell has been that top scorer, shoots 37% from 3, 19.5 points per contest. While that's all well and good, the one thing that does give me caution about Louisville is that they have dramatic home and road splits with their 3-point shooting. Not like Duke has been an amazing 3-point shooting team. They shoot about 34.4% overall, but this Louisville team, when they're at home, they're one of the best teams in the country at 37.1%, and then that falls to 31.8% when they're away from home. And they take over 50% of their shots from 3-point range. Meanwhile, you've got Cameron Boozer is right now right there at the top with AJ DeBanza in terms of odds to be able to win the Wooden Award, and rightfully so. 23.5 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, multiple steals per contest. He has been amazing there. You've got Isaiah Evans, who's been able to give you a lot on offense, shooting 35% for 3 with his 14 points per contest. And this team is so rock solid down low. With Evans giving you a block per contest, Patrick Ngangba has been able to give you 11 points, block and a half per contest, and Dame Sarr just feels like he's a creator for the team. He only gives you about 7 points per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but has really good versatility for the team. Caden Boozer has been able to give you a little bit of facilitation, as well as a Duke team that has really been thriving on the inside. They're a top 5 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and a lot of teams only shoot about 31% from 3-point range, which I think is going to be big in this spot. You've got a Duke team that's playing a little bit faster than they have in the past, but it's not necessarily warp speed fast, and Louisville, they're about 77th in the country in terms of total possessions frame, so they crank it up a little bit more than a Duke team that is 164th. But the wrinkle with this Duke defense of them now adding turnovers, they're 47th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. I do think it's going to be the X factor. Semi-line at an 8.5, so willing to lay up to 80 here with Duke. Made a total of 156.5, so here at the 157 plus, I'm in on the under 889, 890. It's Penn State on the road against Ohio State, and the Ohio State University, a double-figure favorite here of 12.5 to 13.5 points. This game is 153.5 to 154.5. I made a total of a 150.5. I do like the under for Penn State. They're playing slower than they ever have under Mike Rhodes. 279th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Ohio State really not powering the ball up and down the floor either. They're about 213th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Ohio State has become a pedestrian 3-point shooting team at 33.7%, albeit it does go up to about 36.4% when they are at home. But where Ohio State really makes their hay is down low. They've been a top 20 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and they allow opponents to shoot less than 29.5% from 3-point range as well. So that's big, and Penn State always does a great job in terms of limiting possessions, 71st in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while they themselves have been one of the best teams in terms of taking care of the ball in all of college basketball. For this Penn State team, they only turn the ball over 9 times per contest, top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. The freshman and Malai Tunka along Caden Mingo. Big reasons why Tunka shoots 38% from 3, 9 points per contest, and Mingo 2.3 steals, 4.5 assists, 14.5 points per contest, but he shoots 24% from 3, and Penn State is just not necessarily the world's greatest shooting team. They have been a top 125 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and they're just getting gashed on, though they are outside the top 315 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I think that that's going to be an undoing for them. It is a Penn State team that, for lack of a better term, they just gamble for turnovers because they're so bad with their 2-point shooting defense. They allow opponents to shoot over 37.5% from 3-point range. That is a bottom 25 mark in all of college basketball, but they do generate those turnovers. I do think that for Penn State, even though the defense is very, very shaky, shaky. It is an Ohio State team that's going to be looking to pile drive the ball down, though. I think that Ohio State is really going to be controlling the tenor of this game as well, with Penn State not grabbing a lot of second and third chances. This Penn State team is outside the top 250 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they're not doing a bad job on the defensive glass. I really don't think that either team is going to be grabbing a lot of second and third chances. Ohio State is well outside the top 130 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage, but they're doing a pretty good job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. At home, teams are only grabbing about 23.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Away from home, Penn State allows about 29.6% of those missed shots to become a offensive rebound. That is outside the top 200 in all of college basketball in terms of overall defensive rebound percentage, mainly because there's just not a lot of missed shots in Penn State games. It's either a turnover or they make the shot. But that said, I do think that Penn State is going to slow this game down. I flat out just think that Ohio State is going to be able to execute on a low amount of possessions to be able to get it done. I set my line at 14.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Ohio State. Made a total of a 150.5. I'm also in on the under. 891, 892. It's Arizona on the road against BYU, and BYU is a home underdog of 2.5 to 3 points. 164.5 to 165.5 is the total, and I'm going to be in on this under. I did set my total at a 162, and for BYU, I did set them as a 2-point favorite. I'm willing to take a shot on them on the money line. I know that it's a little bit daring. This Arizona team has been undefeated, and Arizona has been one of the most well-rounded teams in all of college basketball. It's an Arizona team that's still going to be obviously looking to push quite a bit of tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This team checks in 47th in all of college basketball. BYU just a hair below that. They're more around 77th in the country, so you're going to get a lot of possessions in this game, but both of these teams have been rock solid on defense. And frankly, for BYU, this is one of the most well-rounded teams in all of college basketball. 20th in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, 23rd in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. Arizona's 5th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and while it takes a little bit of a drop-off away from them, they're still in the top 12 in terms of points allowed per possession in a road/neutral venue for Arizona. What really does take a little bit more of a drop-off is the overall offense. When they're away from home, they average about 12.4 points fewer per 100 possessions than they do at home. Overall, Arizona is about 7th in the country in terms of points per possession, but away from home, they've only been shooting about 32.8% from three-point range, and I do think that A.J. Debinsa is going to be the best player out there on the floor. He has been absolutely incredible for this BYU team, right now registering 23.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and then you throw in there Robert Wright, Richie Saunders. Between these two guys, you get nearly 37 points per contest. Wright has been Mr. Wright, shooting 45% from three with 5 assists per contest. Saunders, pair of steals per contest, 5 rebounds. Kebakita, he gives you about 8 rebounds per game, and Arizona's biggest advantage is going to be on the glass. BYU is about 25th in terms of rebound percentage. Arizona is 3rd, but still, this BYU team I think is going to be able to hold up on the glass. This BYU team has been a very solid team on the inside as well. They're a top 50 team in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, which I think is going to be big in this game, going against a guy in Cole Pete, who's been able to do a really nice job in terms of just giving the team production in general. He was their top scorer to begin the season, but he has been ever since past, as you've had Braden Burris now be able to give you 15 plus points per contest. Kobe Awaka has been that main rebounder as he's been able to supply the team with over 10 rebounds per game coming off the bench. It's been rather impressive what we've been seeing out of him. And Matías Crivas, he's been able to give you double figures with 11 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, but I do think that in the end, Arizona in a very hostile environment, I do think that this is a spot where they get tripped up, as it is an Arizona team that they very much rely upon getting the ball inside. They're actually a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point arc, and I think that BYU finds a way to get it done, and in a tight spot, Arizona shoots about 73.4% at the free throw line. That's about 136th or so in all of college basketball, 140th, and for BYU, they're a top 80 team in terms of their own free throw shooting percentage at home at 77.4%. So made BYU the 2-point favorite. I like them on the money line, and I'm going to be in on the under. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 893, 894. Abilene Christian is going to be on the road against Tarleton State, and Tarleton finds themselves as a favorite of 4 to 4.5 points. 147.5 to 148 is the total, and with Tarleton State, I made them a 7.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Both of these teams are looking to generate turnovers. Tarleton State, second in the country in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis, while Abilene Christian, they are 10th. But Abilene Christian is just the worst offense. I wish I could put it any other way. If you look at them in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, 324th, and both of these teams really do turn the ball over on offense themselves. You've got a Tarleton State team that, in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis, with regards to their own offense, they do rank well outside the top 300 with that that regard. But Abilene Christian is even worse. Abilene Christian, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, 346th, while Tarleton is 321st. And Abilene Christian, they are 289th in the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Guess what Tarleton State is looking to do? They are looking to pile drive the ball down low, as they are the top team in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point line. So this Tarleton State team, I think, is going to be able to excel there. It's a Tarleton State team that's only been about 237th with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, but Abilene Christian doesn't take a lot of threes either, and for this Abilene Christian team, they themselves have had some, shall we say, pitfalls with regards to their interior offense. They're 326th in the country in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage, and I do think that for Abilene Christian, even though they've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, you're going to have a tough time matching up with Dior Johnson, who's able to give you 24-plus points per contest off the bench. You've got Freddie Hicks, who's been able to give you double figures, 5-plus rebounds per game, and right now for this Abilene Christian team, only two guys give you double figures. Braden Hubbard, he's been solid with about 16 points per contest, but he only shoots 30% from three. Rich Smith, he's done a bit of everything. 5 assists, 1.8 steals, 10.5 points per contest. And then you do have pretty much a trio of guys, Zay Wright, Yadiel Rivera, and Lon Childarian Newton, who all shoot between 34.8 and 35% from three, and they all give between 6.2 and 8 points per contest, so relatively good collective there. But this is a Tarleton State team that they don't take a lot of threes, but the ones that they take, they've actually been able to hit quite a few of them. They shoot a right around about 33.7% from three. Cameron McDowell has been able to give you 14 points per game. In a pressure spot, it's a Tarleton State team that actually shoots 76.6% at the free throw line. That's a top 60 mark in all of college basketball. These two teams are aggressive, and Abilene Christian, they're more around 71.8%. That's 197th in all of college basketball. I do think that you're going to get a lot of free throws in this game with the way that both of these teams are looking to foul, looking to generate turnovers. I think that's going to be a sloppy game. I recognize that Tarleton has really sped up their tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This team checks in 34th in all of college basketball. Abilene Christian, still a pretty slow and controlled team at 234th. I think that you get a lot of sloppiness for the under, so I told 145.5, and I think that Tarleton State executes better, set them as a 7.5 point favorite, so won't delay with Tarleton, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-599, 306-600. You got Florida A&M playing host to Jackson State. Jackson State is an underdog of 5.5 to 6 points. 149 to a 150 is the total. And with Jackson State, I did set them as an underdog of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. It is a Florida A&M team that has been all over the place because they just don't do a great job taking care of the ball. Bottom 30 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Solid in terms of generating turnovers, 67th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And for Jackson State, they're certainly not amazing with regards to generating turnovers, about 265th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis overall, but that ascends into the top 225 when they are away from home, and the Jackson State metrics are just all sorts of terrible. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 357th outside the top 340. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, had one of the most brutal schedules that you're ever going to find, though, and they might have the best player out there on the floor. That would be one Mr. Deshaun Ruffin, comes over from Ole Miss, 21.5 points per contest, only shoots about 31% from three, and it's a Jackson State team that's just getting absolutely blowtorched down low. But Diajay Thomas, who began his career over at Southern, he's given the team 5.5 rebounds per game, missed the first 8 games of the season, so he's starting to elevate them a little bit. And for this Jackson State team, they have become a top 275 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage if you factor in D1 and non-D1 games. And for the Florida A&M team, it's not a team that's really going to be executing down low. They're outside the top 250 with their own two-point shooting percentage and opponents' two-point shooting percentage. You've had Jaquan Sanders give you 13 points per contest, and they had an injury of their own with Mike Octave missing the first 9 or so games of the season since he's returned. 10 points, 7.5 boards, so he elevates them a little bit more down low as well. It is a Florida A&M team that has very much not been shy to run in terms of total possessions per game. They check in right around about 70th in all of college basketball. Jackson State more around about 51st in the country, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of sloppiness for Florida A&M generating a lot of turnovers, and they themselves 15.9 turnovers per game. And for Florida A&M, if they do find themselves in a pressure spot, they shoot 65.8% the free throw line. That is a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball. I think that that could be very costly against a Jackson State team that, let's call it what it is, they just have not been very smart on the defensive side of things in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. They're a top 10 team, but in this case, that bad free throw shooting percentage actually works in their advantage, and I think that that's actually going to keep you under in this spot. I set my total at a 147, so I do like the under, and Florida A&M could only make the 3-point favorite. I'm going to take those points with Jackson State. 306-601, 306-602. McNeese versus Southeast Louisiana is a game that has been postponed, and we're going to have a lot of skips. So we go 306-603, 306-604. Alcorn State is on the road against Bethune-Cookman, and Bethune-Cookman is a 12.5 to a 13-point favorite, 145.5 to 146 is the total. And I set my total at a 153. I like the over. You've got a Bethune-Cookman team that has actually been able to do a very good job here on offense recently. For Bethune-Cookman, they have scored at least 74 points in every game since Christmas. That's 7 in total, and they go up against an Alcorn State team that's getting absolutely blowtorch on defense, 356th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Alcorn State has this going for them. 65th in the country with their road 3-point shooting percentage at 36%. Now, it's a whole is greater than some of its parts sort of collective. As for Alcorn State, right now you only have one player on the roster who's able to give you double figures. That'd be Shane Lancaster. He's been able to give you about 10 points per contest. Actually, Tyson McDaniels, with the showing that he had over the weekend, he's up to 10.1 points per contest. So now you've got two guys. So yay verily for our good friend in Mr. McDaniels, but Lancaster shoots 50% from three. Around him, you've got a lot of guys that are hit or miss from three. Davion Williams, Nick Woodyard, they combine for about 18 points per contest. They both shoot between 34 and 35% from three-point range, and really Lancaster is the lone guy on the roster that shoots above 34.5% from three, which is strange because they shoot it pretty well from three-point range away from home. But that said, this is an Alcorn State team that's really going to give up a lot down low. Out of 365 Division I teams, when you factor in D1 and non-D1 games, they're second worst in opponents' two-point shooting percentage, bottom 15 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage, and for Alcorn State, outside the top 350 in terms of ball security, but they go up against a Bethune-Cookman team that they themselves are about 291st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Bethune has been right around about 300th in terms of their own ball security, and for Bethune-Cookman, they've been outside the top 275 with their own two-point shooting percentage, and I set Bethune-Cookman as just an 11-point favorite because in a pressure spot, they only shoot about 69.5% the free throw line. That's outside the top 250 in the country. Now, the doctor is back. Dr. Bradley, he's been back for 5 games. He led the country in free throw attempts per game last season, and he shot on those free throw attempts right around about 46.5%, so that was nice and hearty, but that said, he's been getting better and better with every single game. First 3 games, he scored 7 points or fewer. Last 2 games, he's had a combined 19 rebounds, 8 steals, 34 points, and in those games, Bethune-Cookman got past 85 points in both of them, so it is a Bethune-Cookman team that is really looking to excel there, and both of these teams are playing at a pretty fast tempo. Right now for Bethune-Cookman, in terms of total possessions per game, they are checking in 73rd in the country. For Alcorn State, it's about 115th, and Dr. Bradley is going to be able to help out on the glass big time, but that said, it is a Bethune-Cookman team that they still are relatively sloppy with their overall play. They've been getting outgunned on the glass, despite the fact that Daniel Rouzon gives you 4 rebounds per contest, and it's an Alcorn State team that's going to be giving up a lot of second and third chances themselves. They don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but I do think that the 3-point shooting of Alcorn State and just the overall sloppiness and their ability to generate turnovers, Alcorn State top 225 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, does just enough for them to remain lively. Semi line at 11, so take the points with Alcorn State, and I like the over. Semi total at a 153. 306-605, 306-606 was supposed to be Lamar and East Texas A&M. That game's postponed, so we go 306-607, 306-608. Morgan State is going to be on the road against Norfolk State. Norfolk State does find themselves as a 9.5 to a 10-point favorite. 153.5 to 154.5 is the total, and for Norfolk State, made them a 9.5-point favorite, so 10 plus does become my buy point here on Morgan State. It's a Morgan State team that they look to play fast, but not necessarily warp speed fast, 114th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Norfolk State, a very mid-tempo team at 201st in the country with this regard, and Norfolk State has been rough with regards to their interior offense. They're 327th in the country in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, and I mean, overall, it's not necessarily been a flashy offense. They're right around about 312th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Morgan State, 341st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And if you want to separate it out to just road and neutral court games for Morgan State, right now they are a bottom 5 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So that's a big reason why I'm going to be in on the under. But I will say this for Norfolk State, they're actually shooting 41.8% from 3-point range at home compared to 32.4% in a roadside neutral court venue. But I do think that Morgan State is going to do an okay job of holding in here because it is a Morgan State team that they do one thing. They have their games just being very reliant upon 2-point shooting, as for Morgan State, they are not allowing teams to take a lot of threes. Only about 36.5% of opponent shots come from 3-point range. That's the top 100 mark in all of college basketball. And this is a Norfolk State team that, despite the fact that they do shoot it quite well from 3-point range, they are a team that's going to be looking to pile drive the ball down low. If you look at percentage of shots that come from 2-point range for Norfolk Norfolk State. Norfolk State, 69.5% of their shots come from inside the arc. That is the top 20 mark in all of college basketball, and just mentioned it, they're outside the top 300 with regards to that 2-point shooting percentage. Now for Norfolk State, you do have a pair of nice guards, Elijah Jamison, 15 points, 3 assists per contest, Anthony McComb, 17 points, 4.5 boards, so these guys have been rock solid, but McComb at his 4.6 rebounds per game right now leads the way, though. I do like the Wagner transfer, and Keontae Lewis was able to give you about 4 rebounds per game, and Norfolk State, to their credit, they allow opponents to shoot less than 31% from three. They've actually been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but this Morgan State team is not really looking to go bombs away from three-point range. This is a Morgan State team that, with regards to percentage of their shots that come from two-point range, they are in the top 55 in all of college basketball as well. Now, they've got a 7-footer that doesn't rebound, as you've got Mr. Christian Oliver give you 4.8 points and 2.9 rebounds per game, but Christian Meeks, 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and in the backcourt, you've got a duo that combines for 30 points per game. Alfred Worrell along with Rob Lawson. Lawson, your main facilitator, with about 4.3 assists per contest. Worrell has been able to shoot about 36.5% from three. And Morgan State, overall, they shoot about 32% from three. Not great, but it's become a little bit more respectable. And Morgan State has not been the world's worst three-point shooting defense. I know that sounds like the most encouraging thing that you've ever heard, but that said, with regards to the opponents and how they shoot from three against Morgan State, they allow opponents to shoot 33.3% in a roadside-to-core venue. I do think that this is a game that is destined to go under, especially with both of these teams being very sloppy with the ball, especially Morgan State. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but with Morgan State, won't take 10 plus with them, made this total here a 147.5, so almost going to be in on this total under as well. 306-609, 306-610 was supposed to be Howard versus Galvin State. That game has been postponed, along with Mississippi Valley State Southern, New Orleans versus Nichols, all three games postponed. So we go 306-615, 306-616. It's Delaware State on the road against South Carolina State. South Kakalaki State, a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog, 135.5 to 136 is the total, and I'm going to be willing to dive in on the over. I set my total at a 136.5. Now, Delaware State playing better on defense here in MEAC play. 72 points or fewer allowed in 3 out of their last 4 games, and Delaware State, out of 365 Division I teams, is 364th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got a Delaware State team that's really slowed themselves down for past years as well. 274th in terms of total possessions per game. South Carolina State, not afraid to run. They're about 107th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and South Carolina State overall for the season, 357th in the country. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they have been better in MEAC play, as I was alluding to, and much of that is because their top 6 scorers, 3 of them missed multiple games earlier in the season. They're back, and South Carolina State here in conference play has been shooting 37.5% from three-point range. You take a look at them overall for the season, and I'm not going to call them three-point shooting wizards or anything like that, but you know what? They're about 165th in the country. They shoot 34.2% from three-point range. Your top 3 scorers, and Noah Treadwell, Owen Bronson Jr., Jaden Johnson. Between the 3 of them, you're getting about 31 points per contest. All shoot between 35 and 35.7% from 3. James Merrow missed a little bit of time, 36.5% three-point shooter, 7 points per game. Is a team that's getting absolutely blowtorched down low. They're outside the top 3 40 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and this is a group that if you're taking them on the money line like I am, you have to be cautious of the fact that they shoot 63.5% at the free throw line. That's a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball. Delaware State, meanwhile, 67.4% at the free throw line. That's a bottom 40 mark in all of college basketball. So it's a good old situation. Something's got to give Delaware State a better free throw shooting team, but man, both of these teams are rough. And to the credit of Delaware State, the one thing that they've been able to do is play some rock solid defense. They're a top 190 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Name of the game for them has been generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they're actually 20th in all of college basketball, but they generate a turnover on 24% of possessions when they're at home. That's actually, if I'm not mistaken, a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. They do fall outside the top 35 when they're away from home, so they are a team that they rely upon those home and road splits, and they're relying upon the Ponce James, 14.5 points, shoots 35.5% from 3. Miles Spud Webb has been able to give you 9.5 points. He shoots so well from 3, but he's right now dealing with a little bit of an injury, most likely going to be out in this game. That's a big loss because he is the lone guy on the roster for this team right now that gives you over 3.4 rebounds per game, which means that even for as bad as South Carolina State is down low, they're going to be able to blowtorch them with regards to rebounding. You've got Zion Bethea, who's been able to give you 6.5 points, 3 rebounds. He's a guy that's been around the block, but in in the end, I do think that this is going to come down to some late game falling. Now, I know the dangerous game that I'm playing to the over because Delaware State has exceeded 65 points in regulation against 2 Division I teams as far this season, but I do think that Delaware State finds a little bit more offense against a bottom 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but in the end, I think that South Carolina State finds a way to get the job done. So South Carolina State as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, made my total a 136.5, so at a 136 or less, I'm going to be in on the over. 306-617, 306-618. That is a postponed game between Arkansas Pine Bluff and Grambling, so we go 306-619, 306-620. Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They play also UT Rio Grande Valley. The Vaqueros of UT Rio Grande Valley, 3.5 point underdogs. 132.5 to 133.5 is the total, and I like this total over. I did set my total at a 137.5. UT Rio Grande Valley, some of the most funky bunch home and road splits with regards to a 3-point shooting percentage that you're going to find in all of college basketball. This is a group that right now from 3-point range is shooting over 40% from 3-point range away from home. 40.9%. That is 6th in all of college basketball. They shoot 30.8% at home. I don't get that. At Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they've been overall a good 3-point shooting defense, but they allow opponents to shoot 36.1% from 3 at home compared to 30.8% away from home. Name of the game for Texas A&M Corpus Christi is turnovers. 41st in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Nicholas Shamboyo, he comes over from Denver. He missed the first few games of the season. He's been a heart and soul piece in this backcourt as right now he's supplying the team with about 11.5 points per contest, shoots 36% from 3. Sheldon Williams is sort of that do-it-all guy, 11.5 points, 7 boards. He shoots 35% from 3. And Mason Gibson has all of a sudden shot 42% from 3. So Corpus Christi, about a country average team with their 3-point shooting percentage. It's a little bit difficult to trust them on this line. I set mine at a 3.5, so we're going to be waiting upon a little bit of line movement. I think I saw a 4 out there. If we can get a 4+, I'd be looking there. And if I'm stuck between a 3 and a 4, I would rather take 4 with Grand Valley rather than lay 3 for Corpus Christi, mainly because Corpus Christi, they shoot 66.1% the free throw line. That is a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball, but they have been able to execute from the outside. And this is a Corpus Christi team that has been a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. It's a Grand Valley team that, while they shoot it relatively well from 3, this is a team that's not afraid to pile drive the ball down low a little bit as well. As for Grand Valley, you've got a holes greater than some of its parts approach. You've got a trio of guys that give you between 10.5 and 12.6 points per contest. Corey Cotton, Phil Barachovic, along with Marvin McGee. McGee shoots 42.5% per 3. Brankovic shoots 38% per 3. And then Corey Cotton, he shoots about 35.5% per 3. And it is a Grand Valley team that has their top 3 scorers all shooting at least 76% at the free throw line. They all give you between 4.3 and 5 rebounds per game, so a lot of well-roundedness. Now, for Grand Valley, they're also outside the top 275 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. You get a little bit blowtorch with that regard, and this is a Grand Valley team that has been about a country average team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage as well. You've got a guy who, I'm not even kidding when I say his name, always right, who's been able to give you about 2.5 assists, does a nice job of mixing and shaking for the team. I do think that Grand Valley is going to be able to hold in there, and if you've looked at this Grand Valley team, they do play at a pace of about 4 possessions per game faster when they're away from home rather than at home. So if I can get a 4+, I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Grand Valley, and I'm in on the over. I set my total at a 137.5. The final 3 games before we hit the NEC games are all postponed. 306-621, 306-622, 23, 24, 25, 26. That would be Texas Southern, Alabama State, Stephen F. Austin, Northwestern State, and Carter Word, Houston Christian. They all got postponed. So how about if we go to 306-627, 306-628? You've got Lemoyne, and they're going to be on the road against Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as a 2.5 to a 3-point dog. Total on game 140.5 to 141.5, and I like Lemoyne in this spot. I set them as a 4.5 point favorite. Open looks from 3-point range is going to be the name of the game for this team, as both teams are just absolutely terrible with their perimeter defense. Right now for Lemoyne, a good hearty 352nd in opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Teams away from home shoot 39.6% for 3-point range against them. Fairleigh Dickinson, a hearty 346. Teams shoot 39.4% from 3-point range against them at home, but this is the Lemoyne team that shoots much better from 3-point range. Overall, they shoot 35% from 3. That is a top 120 mark in all of college basketball. Fairleigh Dickinson outside the top 275, and at home they only shoot 28.1% from 3-point range, and Fairleigh Dickinson has traded in their style of just having a lot of guard play to be able to go a little bit bigger down low, and Surreal Martinoff is a true 7-footer that has been able to provide this team with about 5.5 boards, 8 points per contest, so he's been able to do a solid job there. You've got Joy Niesman along with Eric Parnell, who will be able to give you a combined 24.5 points per contest, and I mean for Parnell, he shoots 37% from 3-point range, but these are like the lone 2 guys on the roster that shoot above 33% from 3-point range. We've dealt with a few injuries with Arthur Cox, Noah Melson being in and out of the lineup. Melson, if if he does play in this game, he's going to be rather limited. The last 3 games that he's tried to give it a shot in, he has played 8 minutes or fewer, so that's a little bit of an issue for you. And for Moyne, they are going to be able to match up with the size of Martinoff with Shiloh Jackson, who's a little bit undersized at 6'9", give you about 15 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Trent Mascara, he's been scary, being able to give you about 14.5 points from 3-point. He bombs it at 39% from 3. Tennessee Rainwater, I'm not even kidding, that's his aim, shoots 55% from 3 at about 6'6". He supplies the team with about 9 points per contest. And when it comes to Amitri Moss, he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, so you've got guys like Ja'Kai Sanders and company that have been able to step up on the interim. And for this Moyne team, one thing that they've been able to do a really good job of, you're not going to be able to find good looks inside against them. And this is a Fairleigh Dickinson team that they always have been a team that has been very much based around 3-point shooting. They're attempting about 49% of their shots from 3-point range, so that is a top 45 mark in the country. But again, they don't necessarily shoot it the best from 3-point range, so when they do try to drive the ball inside, it's a Moyne team that, with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, 23rd in the country. That goes to 45.2% in a road/neutral venue, which is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. I think that wins out and gets the job done. I said Moyne as a 4.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number, and I'm in on the over. Semi-total, I had a 148.5. 306-629, 306-620. Central Connecticut is on the road against Stonehill. Stonehill, a 2.5-point home underdog. Total is anywhere between 133.5, seeing as high as a 135 out there as well. Set Central Connecticut as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Central Connecticut did burn me the last time out. They had a little bit of a rough go of it against Fairleigh Dickinson, but I feel like this is a good bounce back spot for them. They are 37th in the country with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, and you've got a Stonehill team that's just awful in the turnover battle. 357th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Dead stinking last in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense. And you do have a Central Connecticut team that does give up quite a few looks from 3. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they make up for it with having Darren Smith Jr. shooting for about 38% from 3-point range at 6'7", 6'8", 20.5 points per contest, shoots 89% of the free throw line. Jay Rogers, 7.5 assists, 2.5 turnovers per game, 12 points per contest. It is a Central Connecticut team that is a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Melo Sanchez, who began his career over at Hawaii Pacific at the D2 ranks, 9.5 points. He shoots 46% from 3. This team is just littered with guys that are able to pop it from 3-point range. Among your top 6 scorers, everyone that has attempted at least 1 3 this season shoots at least 36.8% from the outside. And they've been a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. And for Stonehill, things really just went downhill when they lost Will Batchelor, the transfer from Holy Cross, due to injury. We have not seen him after the first 3 or 4 games of the season. They still do have a little bit of lethality from the outside. They're a top 200 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at right around about 34.2%. You've had Herman Coffey step up in a big way, 14 points. He shoots 40% from 3, and then you've had Raymond Espinal Guzman do a relatively solid job down low. 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Rudvan Tudik, he's been able to give you about 8.3 rebounds per game at Stonehill. They're trying to make up for everything that they don't do in the turnover battle with regards to rebounding. They're actually doing a pretty solid job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances. This is a Stonehill team that they're 12th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing about 23.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. This is a Central Connecticut team that they're more around about 269th in the country with this regard, so that's a little bit of an issue. But with the Central Connecticut team, I do think that they're going to continue to be rock solid and efficient on offense. Top 150 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You just frankly don't get that with the Stonehill team. At Stonehill, they're outside the top 310 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. They've done a great job in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're actually a top 75 team with that regard, but with the way that they get blasted from the outside the top 200 with opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and with the way that Stonehill just can't generate clean possessions in general, I think that that's going to be costly. And also in a tight spot, Stonehill, 67.8% free throw shooting team outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. Central Connecticut, 75.3% top 80 team. So Central Connecticut, I did set as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Recognize that this is going to be a rather slow and controlled game. Central Connecticut is 328th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Stonehill 244th, but did set a total here of a 138. So in on the over to go along with Central Connecticut. And then what was supposed to be our final game in Long Island versus Wagner, well, that got postponed for a second time. So that'll wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Tristan Freeman, who does such amazing work over at Boston Brackets, for joining me in the last segment. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. matters. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you picks and analysis on every game every day. And hopefully they don't get postponed. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.